Here's what you need to know. While Donald Trump may have paused most tariffs on Mexico and Canada again, at least for now, that hasn't stopped a trade war from escalating. Or with, among other things, yesterday that war hitting more than 1 million American victims when Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced this. Play the clip.
Until these tariffs are off the table, until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent. We will not back down. Pausing some tariffs, making last-minute exemptions, it won't cut it. We need to end the chaos once and for all. That's why today we're moving forward with a 25% surcharge on electricity exports. For the 1.5 million American homes and businesses that Ontario powers, homes and businesses in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans. Let me be clear, I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
Right, and this doesn't necessarily come as a surprise. Ford has been threatening this move for weeks in response to Trump's on-again, off-again tariffs. But now he's saying this new tariff on energy exports will remain in place despite the current pause, arguing the back and forth just creates more uncertainty. With him then going on to make it abundantly clear that he's only doing this because of Donald Trump and that this whole situation will only get worse from here.
Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump. None of this makes sense. Costly tariffs against your closest friends and allies do not make sense. The U.S. markets have lost trillions in value. Companies are second-guessing investments into the American economy. American workers' jobs are at risk as we speak right now. Cost of hardworking American families will only go up. It doesn't have to be this way.
Now, notably here, besides the totally preventable costs on Americans and US companies, the total impact that this move is actually going to have, at least in terms of energy disruption, that's expected to be fairly minimal. Right? None of the 3 states impacted actually imports a ton of electricity from Canada. The Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, which runs the regional electric grid and parts of Minnesota and Michigan, said that it expects very minimal effects, noting that less than 1% of its total energy came from Ontario last year. And Minnesota Power, the main electrical utility that serves the part of the state bordering Ontario, said it got a very small proportion of its power from the province. We're bringing in just about $300,000 worth of electricity from Ontario last year and only for 4 months. What's more, one of the larger Canadian suppliers Minnesota gets energy from is Manitoba Hydro, and the province of Manitoba hasn't announced a surcharge on electricity, at least yet. But regardless, we still saw Minnesota Governor Tim Walz condemning the move, describing Minnesotans as the first victims of Trump's trade war, and later acknowledging that while the impact may be minimal, it's about the principles. Saying, so look, even if it were 1 megawatt, this is totally unnecessary. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't impact Donald Trump one bit. It impacts ratepayers in Minnesota. For what? These are our friends. Now, with that said, as far as Ontario's other U.S. neighbors, Michigan actually does get a decent amount of electricity from the province, but the chair of the Michigan Public Service Commission said that the state doesn't actually consume most of it. Instead, the power flows through Michigan into several other states before returning to Canada as part of an electric grid that connects central Canada and states east of the Rocky Mountains. But that begs the question, who will pay for Ontario's new electricity surcharge? But if Michigan is passing most of it off to other states, it seems like the consumers in those other states would bear that cost, which would indicate that this will reach beyond just these 3 border states. And then beyond that, you have other experts raising concerns about the impact this will have on the reliability of the electric grid. With saying the information officer for the Michigan Public Service Commission explaining that electricity flows between the US and Canada as part of an interconnected grid, and adding, any action to limit or disrupt these flows would remove a layer of protection and make all of us, Canadians and Americans alike, more vulnerable to grid scale outages. And then finally with this, for New York, we saw Governor Kathy Hochul announcing that she has ordered state energy officials to review how much the 25% surcharge will drive up costs in the state. And they're accusing Trump's tariffs of being poorly conceived from the start and having no clear economic rationale. Now, notably, with all this, the New York Independent System Operator, the nonprofit corporation that manages the state's electricity, reported back in 2023 that electricity imported from Ontario made up around 3% of total energy use. But, like officials in Michigan, the operator has also previously raised concerns about the potential these measures have to disrupt the highly interconnected systems between the 2 countries. A situation that could ultimately cost New York tens of millions of dollars a year. But then, with all that, of course, we get to the point of, well, how is Trump responding responded to all this. And well, it's been a real fucking doozy even for him. With the seeing in a late night Truth Social post, Trump slamming the 25% surcharge and asserting without any explanation, you're not even allowed to do that. And I'm not even gonna try to debunk that because I have literally no idea what he's talking about. Because by all accounts, like, he started a trade war with our biggest allies, and I'm not sure what he thinks is illegal or is not allowed to happen here. With him then going on to say, because our tariffs are reciprocal, we'll just get it all back on April 2nd. Canada is a tariff abuser and always has been, but the United States is not going to be subsidizing Canada any longer. With them also claiming that Canada is charging the USA from 250% to 390% tariffs on many of our farm products. Right, and what he appears to be referring to here specifically is Canadian tariffs on dairy products, which is something that he's been railing against a lot recently. And while it is definitely true that Canada imposes a tariff of around 250% on US exports of certain dairy products, experts say those high tariffs only kick in after the US has reached a certain quota for tariff-free dairy sales to Canada each year. A quota that, this is a big, key, notable, significant thing, Trump negotiated under the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. But this also, as the dairy industry acknowledges, that the US never actually hits that quota for any category of dairy product, meaning they don't export enough dairy goods for the high tariffs that Trump is referencing to kick in. A fact that the US dairy industry has blamed on various protectionist measures put in place by Canada. But again, despite all that, Trump repeated the misleading claim again on Truth Social today in a wild post where he also made a massive announcement, with him declaring that in response to Ontario's electricity surcharge starting tomorrow, he will be doubling the tariff on all aluminum and steel coming into the US from Canada, raising it from 25% to 50%. Trump then also adding that he will declare a national emergency for the 3 states Ontario targeted, while threatening to substantially increase tariffs on cars imported into the US on April 2nd if Canada doesn't drop the, quote, other egregious long-time tariffs, with him claiming that the move will essentially permanently shut down the automobile manufacturing business in Canada. But then Trump yet again going on to assert that he wants to make Canada the 51st state. And with that, I think it's important that I read a lot of what he said here. With specifically Trump saying that making Canada the 51st state is the only thing that makes sense, and claiming this would make all tariffs and everything else totally disappear. Canadians' taxes will be very substantially reduced. They will be more secure, militarily and otherwise, than ever before. It would no longer be a northern border problem, and the greatest and most powerful nation in the world will be bigger, better, and stronger than ever. And Canada will be a big part of that. And adding, the artificial line of separation drawn many years ago will finally disappear, and we will have the safest and most beautiful nation anywhere in the world. And your brilliant anthem, "Oh Canada," will continue to play, but now representing a great and powerful state within the greatest nation that the world has ever seen. And I'm just gonna let you digest that for a second. Okay. But it's really just the beginning of the trade war that seems like it's inevitably going to just continue to play out despite the pauses that Trump keeps putting in place. And I just don't know what the hell is going to happen, but there's no way Canada is going to let the US make it a state. And if Trump's not going to back down, like where do we go? How do things not continue to get worse? I mean, even before all of the events over the last 24 hours, we saw reports that Quebec is also considering stopping US energy exports. And that's just one of the many areas that could be impacted, especially if provinces continue to act on their own accord, separate from the Canadian federal government, which will also likely continue its own retaliation. But yeah, all in all, it's a rapidly developing situation. We've got eyes on it, and in the meantime, I'd love to know your thoughts. Actually, wait, apparently this situation is developing so rapidly that as I was getting up the show today, all of this just started crumbling apart. First, the news broke that Ford has now agreed to suspend the 25% surcharge after a conversation with Trump's Commerce Secretary, with the two issuing a joint statement saying that they'll be meeting Thursday to discuss a renewed USMCA ahead of the April 2nd reciprocal tariff deadline, and adding, in response, Ontario agreed to suspend its 25% surcharge on exports of electricity. And then, when Trump was asked at a press conference if he would now be walking back his 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum, he responded, probably. With it also being reported that Trump's trade representative has now told CNBC that the 50% tariffs will not be going into place tomorrow as Trump initially promised. So yeah, on and on the roller coaster goes. Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also, a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/Phil, or use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple, no coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil, or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.